Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Helen Cole, and I'm the founder of the Gene Collective. My interest in politics stretches way back to the days when I worked as a municipal clerk in local government, and then I ran for public office for the city of St. Thomas. I since have moved on from St. Thomas because I remarried and moved to another community, but my interest in politics has always been there, as well as my interest in encouraging more women to get involved, especially in local government. So we formed the Gene Collective with a group of local women who bring their own unique skills and talents to the initiative. Our hope is to inspire and educate women to become more active in local politics. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Eleni Bakopanos to our session. And the Honourable Eleni Bakopanos served as a member of the House of Commons from 1993 to 2006. Her roles included Deputy Speaker, as well as various roles within the House of Commons. She was also Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Social Development with emphasis on social economy and Chair of the Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration and Vice Chair of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. Eleni encourages all women to become involved in the political process. Currently, she is chair of Equal Voice, a national nonprofit organization that promotes the election of more women to all levels of Canadian politics. Eleni, thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I look forward to it.
So let's just dive right in. Often we have a reason for deciding to throw our hat in the ring. What was your why? Why did you decide to run for public office?
Well, after having served behind the scenes in various roles with the Quebec Liberal Party, which was the provincial kissing cousin of the federal party, as I often say, and having worked my way up to being an advisor on the cultural communities of Quebec to both the Quebec Minister and the Premier of Quebec, Robert Bourassa, I got married, I had 2 kids, so I went then on to be the vice chair of an advisory body. And one day, I had also, I should mention, distributed pamphlets both for Marc Lalonde and Marcel Prudhomme. And in 1993, Marcel Prudhomme became a senator, and the riding of Saint-Denis opened up, and I received a phone call from the Right Honourable Jean Chrétien, who was then leader of the Liberal Party, who had a mandate from his party to have more women, at least 30% women candidates. And my name was circulated for the particular riding of Saint-Denis, where there were constituents which were from my community and also from the cultural communities who knew me well. And since I had, you can call it karma if you want, since I had started my first political experience distributing pamphlets in that riding, and when Mr. Chrétien appointed me, after saying no first, I did say yes after. And I only said no because I had 2 very young children at home, but my husband encouraged me to say yes, and so did all my friends I had worked with who had given my name. So one of the reasons is it was obviously going from behind the scenes to in front of the scenes. It tends to be one way women end up running for office. The other was my passion for politics and my passion for wanting to be, if you want to make a difference, you have to be the difference, I believe. It's something that I believe truly in, that one person can, in fact, make change happen. As Malawa has said, be the one to bring the change. And I have to say, idealistically also, I wanted to leave a better world for my 2 daughters. So there were a number of factors that led me to finally say yes to Mr. Chrétien, and I was elected in 1993 by a huge majority in that riding of Saint-Denis, which no longer, by the way, exists because of boundary changes. It is now incorporated into the riding of the Right Honourable Prime Minister of this country, Justin Trudeau.
So Eleni, you broke the trail in many ways for women in politics. You must have faced some challenges as being one of the first. Can you tell us more about that? And also, do you think that women still face those kinds of challenges?
I think in general, I must say men and women face challenges in terms of being in public office. When you're in public office, you're out there, you're exposed, both your private life and your public life is open to scrutiny. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. So you have to be very strong. You have to know what your values and principles are. And we can go on later to discuss other issues around that. But I also think for somebody who is the first, in my case, being from a community that didn't have too many women in leadership positions, it was a double-edged sword. In some ways, I had to continue to explain to my community that I'm not the Greek member of parliament, but I'm the Canadian member of parliament of Greek origin. But the whole community embraced me in its good and bad ways. And in very many ways, it was more in terms of trying, when you're a trailblazer, you face a lot more challenges. When you're the first, you face a lot more challenges. But I rose to the occasion. And as I said again, you have, if you choose public life, you have to have very strong core values. You have to know, and you also have to have a great support system around you, which we can discuss if you would like later on. So it was challenging. I did break the mold. I like to tell the story, and we can, I'm going to bring the story in. I like to tell the story where I'm sitting at the head table of a major event in my community, and some guest who has come from outside of Canada asks me whose wife I am. So I actually tell him I'm the wife of Mr. Constantine Yeropapas, but I'm also the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons and Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Justice and Attorney General, and it's a pleasure to meet you. And their eyes sort of grow big and they say, oh, I'm sorry. I said, don't be sorry. You know, you asked the right question. I am somebody's wife. So I was the only one sitting at the head table in my community. Now, I'm happy to report I was not the last. There are 3 women MPs who are of Greek origin sitting, 2 from Montreal, who are very good friends of mine, and Nikki Ashton from the NDP, who are also who's also a very good friend. So I'm glad not to be the last, but to be the first. But being a trailblazer is always very challenging. And, you know, you have to accept that you cannot solve everyone's problems. And it's part of the challenge that you have as a politician, that people lack the knowledge of what members of parliament can really do and what they cannot do and what are their responsibilities. One of my main issues in life has been the fact that we do not have a civics course that teaches our young people what is their responsibility as a citizen, especially to democracy. I could go on and on, Helen, about that, but I'll wait.
That's an excellent point. I do remember visiting Steve Peters when he was Speaker of the House, Ontario. And the fact that they were trying to do some work around educating children about how government works. So it would be great to see more of that. You're right. So
the Canadian Association of Former Parliamentarians did have an educational program where we do go to some of the schools. That, of course, has stopped now with the pandemic. But I think we do need in the school curriculum as such, a course on civics. We talk about people's rights, but we don't always talk about people's responsibilities to our democracy. Democracy is a participatory sport. It is not a sport that you sit outside and you watch. I keep telling people, please participate in your own way, obviously. Mm-hmm. But when you look sometimes at the numbers, Helen, of people who vote, I can tell you in my last election, and one of the reasons I did lose my election in 2006 was only 45% of the constituents went to vote. And the person who, in fact, won the riding won by less than 100 votes, which is one less, 110 votes actually to be precise, which is half a vote per polling station. People stayed home. And some of them were surprised after the election that I had lost. Well, I said, you didn't go to vote. Did you go to vote? So you can, we have to really, really find a way that people feel that their vote counts. And it does count. It does count. In 1993, sorry, I was just going to say in 1993, Anne McClellan, who was the Minister of Justice at the time, won by one vote. One vote. So when people think that your one vote doesn't count, yes, it does. Yes, it does. I
So,
keep reminding them of that matter.
so with regards to the Gene Collective and our focus being on local government, I think it still applies. Our goal is, yes, we want to see equal representation at all levels of government, but we also want to encourage people to become more involved, whether it's local government or provincial or federal. So you're right on with what you're saying there, and hopefully.
Well, when you look at the numbers in municipal politics, it's actually even lower than what it is in terms of the voter turnout on the federal and provincial. And it's very sad because municipal politics is the level of government that touches everybody's lives, no matter how you look at it, cleaning your streets, picking up your garbage. And I find it interesting that not more people are actually interested in actually looking more closely and participating in municipal elections. I try as much as I can to get involved and help the women. And I am represented at all three levels of government by women, which I have helped personally and mentored two of them, in fact, at the federal and at the municipal level. So I'm very proud of that in my riding of Ahunsik, where I do live.
Well, that's wonderful. And we'll all continue to work on this, and hopefully we can make a difference.
It's one of the missions of Equal Voice. We're also multi-partisan, by the way, and we do try to bring in everyone from all the political parties. We are not partisan in terms of the work we do. And I think it's going to take women working together, even with the Gene Collective and other organizations. We are open to any type of collaboration in order to be able to encourage women to run for office or help another woman run for office. You don't necessarily, not everybody's made for public life, but I know everybody can make a contribution.
Yes, you're right. You're right. So in your opinion, what do women bring to the table, and how do you think the environment might change if more women become involved in politics?
Women bring a different style of leadership. For example, and that doesn't mean all women and all men. I have to be very careful on that also, because there was once a question that was addressed to me, Jean, that I'll share with everybody in a major international forum. And it was actually the woman who ran Hillary Clinton's campaign who asked me the question. She said, would you vote for a woman? And I said, that's a very loaded question. I would vote for a woman who shared my values and my principles. You cannot vote for any woman for any office unless they actually share your values and principles. Otherwise, it's counterproductive in some ways. If you're going to vote for somebody, for example, who doesn't believe in choice for women or who is against abortion, it goes against my own views and principles. What do women bring to the table? They bring a different type of leadership. I have found that women tend to collaborate more in terms of certain issues. For example, anything that touches women's reproductive rights, anything that touches justice, violence against women, conjugal violence, in terms of having more women also in terms of cabinet positions. For example, although I applaud the Prime Minister for having a parity cabinet, which was something that I worked for also behind the scenes as the president of the Women's Commission of the Liberal Party, the women were not given economic portfolios until Chrystia Freeland was appointed the first finance minister of Canada. And so it's nice to give the women the social files, but it would be nice to have women representing. And now I'm very proud of the fact that Chrystia Freeland is the first female minister of finance, but I think we have to have more women. So there is more of a collaborative effort. They also bring skills that they've learned from other facets of their life. I mean, we try to nurture our children, so we try to nurture our colleagues. I know I had a few colleagues who I worked with very closely, and we helped each other when there were difficult times, because it is a very lonely life being a member of parliament, by the way. It's a very competitive environment because there are only so many seats around the cabinet table. So the competition is very high, but at the same time, it's nice to be able to have a group of MPs who you can discuss the challenges that you faced in your own portfolio. And I was very lucky to have a few very close members of parliament who were very supportive of me, and I was supportive of them, as well as having a very supportive husband and a very supportive family. My parents played a key role in terms of helping me with my 2 young daughters when I was away in Ottawa, and they were colleagues. So I think in terms of women facing challenges, there are many challenges both men and women face in politics, but women also are still the major caregivers in very, very many situations. We've seen recently changes in terms of younger women bringing their babies, and you may or may not agree, breastfeeding them in the House of Commons. That's a major change, but at the same time, their colleagues have accepted that practice. So there have been changes. I also think one major change that took place recently, which I'm very happy about, and I know Equal Voice worked on it, was having a parental leave for members of parliament. Never existed before. That happened last June, and a major, major change. And I think it was brought about also because one of the ministers, Karina Gould, also took time off when she had her baby, time off in the sense that she worked from home, because there's really no time off for a minister or an MP, but she did work from home. And the technology has permitted that now. Mm-hmm. Before, we didn't have access to the same technology.
That's true. And the current life we're living with the pandemic and everything else has resulted in us learning new skills and using new tools like we are today. I mean, you're in Quebec and I'm in Ontario, and here we are having this conversation. So there's always something good. So based upon, and you and I agree, and many of these changes I think are long overdue when you think about how far we've come in the years since women suffragettes were active in getting us the vote. We've come a huge distance with more to go, I think. So based upon what we've talked about so far, how do you think we can get more women involved, and how can we affect change?
I think a number of things have to change. For example, we have to change also the hours of sitting of the House of Commons. Okay, people have to somehow find a better balance between their private family responsibilities and their professional responsibilities. One good thing from this pandemic is that a lot of members can work actually from their constituency offices, which means they get to go home at night, something I couldn't do. And as you moved up in terms of being an ordinary MP, you could be able to be home in your riding, obviously, on Mondays and Fridays. But when I was Parliamentary Secretary for Justice, I had to be at the Justice Department at 7 o'clock on Monday morning. On Friday, I would take question period when the minister wasn't there. So it becomes harder and harder, and ministers have to travel all over the country, which now that isn't happening anymore with a pandemic. So the pandemic, in a way, has allowed for some changes. And we have now seen that it's possible to be able to vote, because they've just introduced also an app in the House of Commons to be able to do voting with the app instead of being physically in the House of Commons. So I think a lot of these changes will be beneficial in terms of having some sort of private life for a lot of the members of Parliament, which a lot of them are much younger. I was 39 years old, by the way, when I first got elected, with a 1.5 and a 3.5. So I was actually the average age of most of the parliamentarians now in the House of Commons. But I think we need to see more women take over, for example, political parties. We do not have a female leader of a political party apart from Elizabeth May, who was there for the Green Party, and now the new leader of the Green Party. Sorry, I said Liberal Party before I meant Green Party. So I would like to see, in the future, perhaps more women premiers. We had 9 about 5 years ago. Now we have not a single woman premier in this country. So until we start to see those type of role models, and we've seen some of the challenges that a lot of these women have faced, but I think we have to change, first of all, how political parties elect their leaders. the type of financial background, financial support that you need also to be able to run leadership campaigns or even a nomination race. Some of the political parties are doing away with the fees that they are charging women for the nomination races, which would allow more women to be able to run. Because the other aspect that I found very challenging is having to raise money for each of my 6 elections in 13 years. I had to raise $500,000 in 13 years, which doesn't sound like a huge amount when you compare it to what happens in the United States with millions of dollars, but it's still a huge amount of money. Wow. And thank God that I had the support, particularly of my own community, to be able to raise that money. So raising money is still one of the barriers. The times that the House of Commons or legislature sit, we've been working with a lot of the different legislatures to systemically change some barriers that have been existing in each of the legislatures. For example, in the past, there is no daycare service in the House of Commons. Although now they provide some sort of care where some of the MPs can actually bring their young children into the House of Commons when there is an all-night voting session. I know that in the Ontario legislature, the times were changed in order to not have night sittings, unless it's an emergency debate, of course. So I think if we can change the way Parliament is actually functions and the hours to make it more family friendly, I think would be great for men and women also. And as I said, there have been some changes, but I think we still have a long way to go. We're only 29%. When I left Parliament, it was 24% women in the House of Commons. 20 years later, it is 29%. So we've moved, well, we're getting close. I think it's 29.7 or something like that. We're moving close to the 30%, which is critical mass, but we're still not there. And until we start valuing public service, which requires both a little better representation of members of Parliament by the media and some control on social media also, which has played a big role in terms of discouraging women. We've had cases recently of how Catherine McKinnon, when she was Minister of the Environment, was called a Barbie doll, how she was harassed. I think that we have to put some controls, and I recently actually read an article that they're looking at putting some controls on social media in terms of not having hate or fake news or harassment or misogynism or racism on those platforms. The more we can change that, I think the more women will be more likely to run. But it is one of the few jobs, by the way, where you have equal pay, not necessarily for equal work, but you do have equal pay for the work you do with your male colleagues.
And that's a good thing. And you touched on my next question, which was about social media. And thank you for doing that. That certainly is a challenge for whether it's male, female, or whatever. The social media piece is a challenge for all who might decide to run for public office. Do you have any suggestions on how we get over that hurdle and how we deal with the anonymous keyboard warriors?
I think I liked, like I said recently, that I understood that there will be some discussion about controls that can be put on social media platforms to, as recently was done, by the way, with Mr. Trump, where he was denied access to Twitter or any of his platforms because they felt he was encouraging hate. I think that would be a good first step. But overall, may I return to what I said earlier, Helen? You have to know who you are. You have to know what your values are. You have to know what your principles are. You have to be really strong, because even before there were social platforms or social media, there were still people who would espouse hate. I would have people who believed in the separatist movement actually call my office and say all sorts of obscenities and hang up the phone. So, I mean, I didn't let that get to me. And I think one of the lessons that I would like to put out there is think how strong you are before you decide that you're going to actually run for office, because you're dealing with people, and people can be great. And the majority of the people that I've met over my 13 years as a member of parliament were very supportive. They were very kind. They were very caring. They gave a lot of themselves to me and they helped me. But there were a few, which maybe it wasn't a mob, but it was certainly a few who once in a while would disrupt either a town hall meeting that I was doing or another, but you cannot let that get to you. There will always be in life people who are negative, people who, for whatever reason, without going into all the reasons, who just find a way of taking out all their frustration on a public figure. You have to be very, very strong to ignore that and be focused on your purpose. Your purpose is to be able to provide for all your constituents a public service, to help them with their problems with the Canadian government, and to also, because you are part of a team, obviously, and especially when you're in government, to also support the government in terms of the type of legislation and bring forth also your own policy ideas and be able to see them through. I had a number of successes, which I know made a difference in terms of the lives of people. So you have to stay focused, and you cannot be afraid of those few people that are out there. So social media now has given them anonymity, which is the worst way of being attacked, right? Because you cannot really answer back. But as Catherine McKenna and others have dealt with it, you try to respond and then you ignore. Because really, life is full of those type of hurdles. Even if you work in the private sector, there will be people that no matter what you do, will be negative. But if you're strong and you know what, and you're focused and you know what your values are, I think you can survive.
You brought up so many excellent points there, and actually started to run into my next question was, what piece of advice do you have for women? And I think you really hit upon that when you said to know who you are and be true to yourself. The other thing that came to mind was we have been focusing so much on social media, but you're absolutely right. Before social media, we had the telephone. And
exactly.
I thought, oh my gosh, to be a politician today and have to deal with social media, that must be so difficult. But I do remember when I was a local elected official that I got telephone calls, and they were not nice. Some were, some weren't. And so I moved past that, just as you're suggesting. So that really is great advice for everyone, actually everyone who might watch this.
I would like to add one other piece of advice,
Sure.
which is something I find we forget sometimes. Make sure you surround yourself with people who are very supportive, be it your own colleagues. As I said earlier, I was able to have a few colleagues I was very close to and we could share some of our challenges. Your family, obviously, I had a very, very supportive husband who gave up a lot in his professional life to be able to be with my children and his children, obviously, our two daughters. I had a very loving parents, but I also kept a small group of very close friends that I've known for many years who are not involved in politics, but who were very supportive of me. So you do need to have a very supportive group of people when it's hard, and there will be hard times, obviously, in politics, are very supportive of you, because you'll need them after you leave politics. Never forget that. Never forget that after you leave politics, you need to have a group of people who will be there for you. And a lot of times when I mentor young women, the first thing I ask them is your significant other 150% behind the decision to run for office? That is the first question anybody should ask themselves. Because I've been on panels, I've moderated panels where I can give you one example. I was moderating a municipal panel where 4 municipal councillors, all female, had been divorced within 2 years of being elected with small children. That was a real eye opener for me. And I considered myself extremely grateful and happy that my husband was with me throughout the greatest experience in my life. It really was a pleasure and an honor to be able to serve in the House of Commons, and who helped raise with me, because I was with my daughters when it counted. I was at the schools, I was at their exhibitions, I was at their dance classes, I was at the swimming lessons. So you have to find a way to be able to balance it, because there is a life after politics. And it's sometimes it's hard to make that transition from private, from being a public person to being a private person. For me, it was a lot easier because I had spent most of my life in politics. So I knew how difficult it was on relationships, how difficult it was in terms of the work you have to do in the riding. It is not it's not a 9-to-5 job. It is 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, if you really believe in public service. Some do it differently, but I know for most of the women that I have worked with, that it was an all-encompassing, it was their passion. It was what they wanted to do, to be able to give back, to make a difference. So if that's what you want to do, you have to be really, really prepared for the challenges, but make sure that there is a support system there for you.
Excellent advice. And you're right. I do remember that when I was a local politician. We had a little team within council, but I also had my support system outside of that. So Eleni, often you have mentioned mentoring younger women. So was there a woman who mentored you? And if so, can you tell us a little more about that? And I'm conscious of your time, because I know.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine.
Okay.
I thought about this question when I saw your question, because I've had male mentors and female mentors. Okay. And I have to say, it would be extremely hard to point one in particular out, but I can give you an example of Robert Bourassa, the Premier of Quebec, who I worked with, who I, often had discussions with, and who had been, Premier, had been thrown out from his own party and had come back to win again an election and become Premier of Quebec again. So I had watched his career, and he was one of my mentors. Jean Chrétien was another mentor, but I also had 2 or 3 women, Louise Rebic, who unfortunately passed away last year, who was a very close friend and a mentor. Shirley Mailleux, who was another MP, Sheila Feinstone, who I had known, both Louise and Sheila, I had known from my days at the Quebec Liberal Party from 1970s. We had gone that far back. Louise was the president of the party when I was an organizer. So I've had a lot of those women who had been in politics, who were always there for me whenever I wanted to run anything, through them, especially Sheila and Shirley, who had already been sitting in the House of Commons before I ended up going there. So I've had a number of male and female mentors. And I think you have to reach out to both. Whoever is there to listen to you, whoever is there to give you advice, and whoever is there to be there when you're going through a hard time. Especially when you're having difficulty trying to understand what's going on. When you're first elected, the first year is an extremely difficult year for most people, because you're trying just to figure out where the bathrooms are. Never mind. No, but seriously, I'd like to tell you a joke. When we arrived in the House of Commons, it was the first time there were that many women elected in 1993. And that was also thanks to the 30% minimum quota that was set by the Liberal Party for the leader then, Jean Chrétien. But we were obviously more women. Well, there was only one bathroom on the same level as the House of Commons. So we went to the Speaker and asked the Speaker if he wouldn't mind giving us another bathroom, because the men had 3, if not 4. So about 6 months later, the Speaker said, "Oh yes, you have another bathroom." And if you ever watch Question Period after Question Period, where the journalists are in the main hall of the House of Commons, outside of the House of Commons, you'll see some members going on the right-hand side as you're watching outside of the House of Commons to a room. So some of the journalists were watching male and female MPs going into a bathroom. So the speaker had given us half a bathroom. In other words, he had taken a bathroom that was male. So we made progress in our first year, I said, because we got a half a bathroom. So it's very interesting how, these little things that don't seem more, significant, but it's part of what I always say. We made great progress in my first mandate because we actually got a half a bathroom more than we had before because of the number of females. But all that said is, what I say to them mostly, the women that mentored me, and I feel I have to give back. I was mentored, and if anybody comes to me from any political party, from any level of government, I'm more than prepared to sit down with them and offer them my best advice. In the end, it's up to them. And I do say that you don't only have to run for politics. We have a slogan at Equal Voice. First, we say, in other words, run for office. So you would be her. If you cannot be her, support her. In other words, in any way you can, you support her financially, you support her by doing door to door, by distributing her pamphlets, but even just going and saying hello and I will vote for you. What can I do for you? Or if you can't even do that for a number of reasons, then applaud her success. Whether she wins or not, she's still, the fact that she put herself out there is enough to applaud. So I still believe that those three things are what we can do as individuals, also as women, to encourage women to run for office, because not everybody wants to be out there. True. But be behind. And, we all stand on the shoulders of others who have come before us. I've never forgotten that I stand on the shoulders of some great women. For example, my riding of Ahunsik was represented by Jean Sauvé. I remember Jean Sauvé when I was very young. I've lived in this riding for over 60 years. Jean Sauvé was my member of parliament. She became speaker, the first female speaker of the House of Commons. And she also became Governor General, if we remember back. So Jean Sauvé had an illustrious career. She's one of my heroines. And I always remember when I became a member of parliament, I used to look at her portrait, especially when I came out of the speaker's entrance. She was right there. And I used to say, well, I stand on your shoulders, Jean. And I've never forgotten that. She was an inspiration for me. When you ask me about one person who inspired me, she inspired me. But she's not the only one. It's hard to choose. I have to say. There's so many great women who have come before me in terms of politics or in other aspects of my life.
It sounds as if you've had some really terrific support, both during your time as an elected official and since. And I love hearing that you're continuing to support because of what you received. And part of your support is being in this interview today. And we certainly appreciate that. Thinking back to when you were just beginning your journey, what advice would you give to yourself, your younger self? Mm-hmm. And it may be, as you've already mentioned, being true to yourself. But if you have anything to add to that, let us know.
I think one thing that women don't do well, Helen, is they don't toot their own horn well. Men do it very well in politics. I'm referring to politics now. So one thing I would do differently if I was to be, to go back to the time that I was elected, maybe not during my first mandate, because you're really learning in your first mandate, okay, about the House rules, about the House of Commons, about your colleagues. But I think often enough, I remember sitting in caucus and listening to all the men talk about all the great things that they had done. And on the other hand, the women would go up to the microphone and ask the prime minister to, that this is a problem that I'm facing, that the country's facing, and, how can I help? And how can you help? Give me the tools to help. Instead of saying, I did great things on the weekend or during the week, we would be more policy oriented, issues oriented, whereas the men would go out and toot their horn. And men tend to ask to be in cabinet, by the way. The rest of us would sit there and think, oh, wow, he's going to recognize us. We've worked so hard. We've done great work for the party, for the government. And oh boy, we're going to be recognized one day. One thing I would do differently, I would toot my horn and I would talk a lot more about my successes to both the leader and the public.
You've raised an excellent point. Whether it's politics or not, women are just not good at promoting themselves. We're always finding reasons why it wasn't as good as it could be. My own little Zoom interviews are an excellent example. I watch them afterward and I'm so hard on myself. And really all I am is just a local person who's trying to make a difference. But you're right, we women are not kind to ourselves. So thanks for bringing that up. Now, we already talked about this, but you may have more to add. So our conversation kind of flowed around some of the questions that are coming up. But how do you feel that we can encourage more women to get involved in politics, whether it's behind the scenes or on the front line?
Well, I think I did say that some of the rules have to change for each of the political parties. I mean, there are political parties in Canada, for example, the Conservatives give no preference, let's put it that way, in terms of having,
Eleni,
yes?
let's bring that down to more of a generic level.
Oh, no, I just meant we have to make changes in terms of political parties.
Yeah.
Changing the way, I didn't mean to criticize any political party. Each of the political parties have their own rules for selecting candidates, for example, okay? I personally happen to believe in quotas, but that's a personal, this is not equal voice, by the way, speaking. This is me. I do believe if we're ever gonna reach parity in terms of politics, in other words, 50-50, even though we're still 52% of the population, not 50% or 51, apparently we've surpassed to 52% of the population females. I think in order to move the dial, we have to have some affirmative action. And it's not everybody that believes in that type of system. But I truly believe that we have to be able to remove all the barriers that exist, be it financial, be it personal barriers, because as I said, it's another generation going into politics who are in childbearing age. They want to be able to have time off, and they've introduced it now into the House of Commons, and I'm very proud that it was one of the recommendations we made to the Standing Committee, Equal Voice made to the Standing Committee. So I think you have to be able to remove barriers. You won't remove all the barriers, obviously. So it has to begin with the individual. You have to be able to say, what is your motivation for running for politics? Your motivation has to be, in my opinion, that you will make a difference. And you will. I truly, truly believe every single person in the House of Commons, no matter what their political affiliation, has by their very presence made a difference. I know I did. Today, as I said, there are 3 women from my community who are sitting in the House of Commons. I was the first, but I wasn't the last, and I'm very proud of that. So I think be open to what it means to be in public service. And again, if you cannot be the one to run, then be the one to support a woman who shares your values and your principles, and support her to run for office, because even that is participating in our democratic process. And that's the bare minimum, by the way. If we go back, I really want to encourage people to vote. Please vote, don't stay home. It takes less than, a minute most days to be able to get to the voting station, or even 5 minutes. Get the voting station, vote, and feel that you've contributed to the democracy. That is my one piece of advice for the general public. Please vote. Please vote. Be part of our democracy.
And you made an excellent point earlier when you were talking about the one vote difference. And what I often hear from people is, why should I bother? I can't make a difference. Well, really, we can make a difference if we—
Absolutely.
Even if in your household, you have differences of opinion, say your husband wants to vote one way and you want to vote another, it's still really important to exercise your democratic right at every level of government, whether it's local, municipal, provincial, or federal. So,
or even school boards, for example,
school
number
boards,
of people that vote in school boards It's incredible that education, which is the foundation of our society for a better world, we want to have a good education system, less than 20% vote in Quebec on school board elections. And that's where actually, may I also add that I see more women actually running for school board elections or municipal elections than I see them running for the other levels of government. And it makes sense in a way, because they both levels, be it the school board or the municipal, you're actually home in the evenings. So especially if you have young children, you'll be home and you'll be able to see your family on although you're still working just as hard, and you're still at the obviously at service of your constituents.
And it's great. It's a great training ground. If
Yes.
you have aspirations for other levels of government, it's great that you brought up school board, because school board and local municipal government are great training grounds if you're interested in moving up through the ranks, so to speak.
Or even learning about politics in general. If you start at the municipal level, you're obviously learning, about committees. You're learning about how do you adopt legislation? How do you bring forth policy changes? So I think it is very good training ground for most women, especially if, like I said, they have young children.
So, Eleni, we're in challenging times, and I'm wondering if you have like one good story that is amusing that you could share. You've already shared the bathroom, but
yes, I have.
You have something else that you could quickly share with us.
Oh God, there's really. I was trying to think about that last night, Helen, in terms of sharing some stories, but I really can't come up with one really funny story in all my time, except for the bathroom incident. There is another incident which I hope eventually to put into my book, because it actually led me to the title of a book that I would like to write. I'm not sure I will be able to do it, but it's on my bucket list, as people said, which was rewarding bad behavior. Often in politics, we don't reward good behavior. We reward bad behavior, okay? In the sense that for whatever reason, the leader decides to give somebody a little treat by taking them with him when he's going on a trip someplace. And again, it impacts a lot what I said earlier about women often don't talk about the good work they're doing. They don't talk about their successes. They don't promote themselves. Whereas the males are often, as I said, the microphone and during caucus to talk about all their successes and what great weekend they had and what problems they took care of. So it was very interesting trying to look at the caucus and seeing how some people who were not behaving as good team players were in fact able just the same to move farther ahead. Because I remember having a conversation once with a leader, and he says, well, you have to give them something to keep them quiet, Eleni. And I said, oh, so we're rewarding bad behavior. And that's how I came up with the title of the book, because I felt he was rewarding bad behavior, but he was trying to take care of a situation that was becoming a little difficult in terms of the caucus by that particular member of parliament. So it's interesting how I viewed it in a different way. I viewed it that you should reward the people who are hardworking, who are really doing their job, who are team players, who are actually sitting in the House of Commons when they're asked to sit in the House of Commons by a whip. So really, that was an eye opener for me, that conversation, on how sometimes the leader felt that he had to give something to somebody who perhaps didn't deserve it, but because to calm them down in terms of causing perhaps other problems for the team.
Think that happens in many areas of life.
For sure.
So my final question, Eleni, is when you look 10 years into the future, what do you envision? What would you like to see in terms of politics?
I would like to see the prime minister, female prime minister, a female US president, and across the country, I would like to see the premiers all women. It's very idealistic, obviously,
Wow.
Helen, but it's not impossible. It is not impossible. Look at the situation we're in now in terms of the US, Kamala Harris, what a great first in many, 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 many ways. But I think we have the possibility of having a female prime minister. I think the public is ready for it. I don't think they're not ready for it. But in 10 years, I hope I will be able to see many more women in leadership positions among the G7 nations, in our own country. If I stick just to our own country, I hope I'll see more women leaders of political parties and perhaps a prime minister. So I'm going to work towards that. I can tell you that I'm going to work towards that by encouraging more and more women, because I think the more there are women in politics, the more people accept it as a fait accompli, as they say in French. It's there, they've proven themselves, they've proven that they can do the job, that they are capable leaders, and that they should deserve an opportunity to also lead the country or lead the provinces. So that's what I hope to see in 10 years, more women and more women leaders in leadership positions.
Excellent, excellent. We're on the same page. Your vision is very audacious. So
it is
what we have in 10 years. So
we have to dream big, Helen. We have to dream big.
We do.
And if we dream small, we get small changes. If we dream big and we get people joining our ranks, as you are doing by just doing this video, and as I believe I'm doing with Equal Voice, I think the more women and men we bring into the tent, because we can't do it alone. I have to insist on that. We cannot do it alone. And I don't want any man feeling in any way that we're excluding them. What we're doing is we're asking for a partnership. We want them to partner with us to be able to give equal opportunities to men and women, and in all its diversity, in all its diversity, because
excellent points, Eleni. And in my community, in my county, one of the reasons we're interested is because we have nowhere near 50%, nowhere near. We have local councils who have absolutely no women. And we believe that, as we've discussed, that the perspective that we bring and our way of collaborating and working together brings value. I have had people ask if men can attend our sessions, and of course they can. It's just that we are trying to encourage more women because we need to, and because we have something to offer. So I want to thank
there are many men who have been very supportive, as I said earlier. Sorry, Helen. As I said earlier, I had both male and female mentors. And I don't think any women listening to this should exclude reaching out to any male mentor. Anyone that she respects, anyone that she admires, anyone that she wants to follow in the footsteps or help. I think both men and women can give advice to any woman who is interested in politics.
True. And some of our upcoming education series, we have men delivering some of the workshops. So they are mentoring us as we go through the process. And we just finished one of 2 local counselors. It was a male and female. And so certainly men have much to offer and much support, knowledge, in addition to teaching us how they work, and so that we can borrow some of that from them. So our education
Absolutely.
Our education series is complete for this year, for 2021. And there are monthly sessions. You can register for any of those on Eventbrite. And you can also go to our website, which is thegenecollective.ca, and find them all there. The link to Eventbrite for each workshop is also there. And Eleni, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure, Helen. And I wish all those women who are going to tune in that if they have any questions, they want to get in touch, you're available, I'm available. Just reach out and ask. Reach out and ask for help
Thank you.
or for advice, one of the two.
That's
But
wonderful.
thank you so much, and I wish you much success with the
Thank
Gene
you.
Collective, and I admire what you're doing, Helen.
Oh, thank you. Our measure of success will be if we see more women involved, whether it's behind the scenes or running for public office. So thanks once again.
Thank you.
And to those of you who are watching today, I thank you. I hope that you will be inspired and encouraged to become involved and create change from within, to be the change, as Eleni said. And I'm ending every session with these words because I'm so inspired by this woman, Jacinda Ardern. She says, we can create our own path. We can be our own kind of leader. We need to create a new generation of leadership. I believe we can do this together, and I encourage you to try. Thank you so much for joining us today.